just ask people, because I saw many of you over here cold working, that you bring your piece so I can point out some stuff on these and that we can look at as collective examples to discuss. So this one, I'll just talk about it and then pass it around. This one, there's some marks from the saw here. I would suggest that this one just continues to get flattened down. And then use the belt sander to smooth this edge out. It looks like that's something that's already started to happen. Who's this? You were already belt sanding this on the edge. Most of the time, once you start belt sanding to smooth, you're gonna have to cover like most of the surface, which is fine. That is really where you'll spend most of the time, is in the smoothing. The next stages after you've smoothed it should go pretty quickly. It's really just about marking it with the Sharpie and making sure that you cover everything. Remember, like, go twice as long as you think that you need to. Spending the extra time at each one of those stages will significantly speed up the process. Okay, so a little bit of saw mark here. I showed you all last time using the belt to flatten. That's probably a good idea for this because you have a ridge here that dips down below. It just tends to go faster on the belt than it does on the grit grinder, where you're trying to get the whole surface both flat and remove the whole level at once. So that's my suggestion on that one. This one, and this is something that we'll see commonly, is marks from the 60 grit. It's a lot of work to take out. The only advice I can offer on that is don't slip, because those are, in terms of time, those are time costly mistakes, right? One thing to consider about bubbles, when you grind through a bubble, oftentimes you will get glass dust in there, but you can also get chips stuck in here. So great example to have one of these, because what I do between each stage is I wet this and rinse it out a few times. So I wet it, and then I use the compressed air to blow it out. And I do it over and over again. So it's kind of tough to see, but what I want to see when I look in there, and if I have a window sort of from the side or a view from the side, is when I look in there, whether I use my magnification vision or an actual magnifying lens or glasses or whatever, is that I should see no particles, like no little like glass dust in there. I should see nothing inside of those bubbles. It's really helpful to make sure that you clean them out fully before you go on to the next one. Bubbles can also be difficult because as you're working on them, they don't fully, you can't bevel a bubble, right? So very small, this has all around the edge of it little tiny chip outs, right? And so as you work on it, you'll start to notice that usually moving in a tangent from those bubbles will be scratches. That's little chunks of that chipped edge coming loose as you're grinding it and scratching across the surface. So that's just essentially glass letting go of the edge and moving across the surface. Oftentimes stuff that you have to then go back and remedy. So stuff like this can also be, if you have bubbles, that happens less when you do it on the belt sander than when you do it on the flat grinder. It's just less of a tool that grabs stuff and pulls it out. Before you go any further on this one, you'll definitely want to take the chip out fully, so you guys can pass this around. Take a look at the bubbles and the edge and stuff like that. This one, pretty straightforward. This one was dropped too, right? So we're bumped against something, so you have a little divot. This is something that you'd want to take out. That's kind of also a long process. This one looks like it was ground on the 60 grit grinder. right on the pad over here. In general, not a good idea to do anything on the lap wheel that's not flat. It's not a huge deal if you do it on the metal pads, those electroplated ones, but never use these resin pads, the ones that are on here, or the polishing pad. Never use those on anything that's not rounded. You're essentially like digging a groove. What's that? Anything that's not flat. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anything that's not flat. Don't use on those pads over there. You essentially are like pushing a ridge or a divot into those pads as you use them, because they do have a flexible surface. So best to, on the rest of this, just take it through on the belts. Also, make sure you mark everything, because once this gets wet, it's very hard to see any of these marks and easy to not be covering all the previous scratches that you put into it. Yeah.
So what if you're trying to like flatten around the side? Is it okay to dig into the lap wheel then? Or would you
Flatten what?
Like if you have a rounded side and you want it to like flatten out,
Totally. Yeah.
go straight to the lap, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. You guys get this. You don't need me to pass it. This one, I will pass this one around. It has a flat side. It has a bevel, but then it also has like a couple alternate sort of angles on it towards this edge over here. So this one you just want to continue grinding until you get a flat surface all the way across. Singular surface, grinding past all of those sort of alternate angles on it. You don't really need to mark them with the Sharpie until they're already flat. The Sharpie is really used to help you identify as you're grinding that you've somewhat gotten through the previous grit. When you're doing this on a ground surface or a sanded surface, whichever you're doing, grinding or sanding it, with the idea that you want to do it at least twice as long, it's not a bad idea to fully mark it, grind through till you see no more black on it, mark it up again and do it again. That will help to hopefully make sure that you get through all the way, but always helps to go longer than you need to at the stage you're at rather than jump forward prematurely. This one, also a little slippage here on the edge. This edge is rounded. Were you hoping to flatten it or move to the belt to continue rounding it?
Probably
Flatten it?
Yeah.
So really, to flatten a large surface, it's actually not a bad idea when you're on one of the electroplated pads that are in the cage over here in the cabinet. To start out by grinding it like this. I think I was showing you that last week, right? Sort of going around like this and then flattening it. That can help you to get a wider surface a bit more flat, as opposed to starting flat and then eventually sort of leaning to one side. So it can help to kind of get some of the mass off by going in kind of a conical way or a domed way to bring some of that, to remove some of the mass and then start to go flat once you've established that. A bit of work will go into smoothing out these chip outs here, or these scratches here. Good colors. Kim, this was yours. Are you doing slices on this?
Wasn't intended.
Not
I'm
intentionally?
mostly working with that.
Okay.
I don't know. I grew up playing with that
Yeah,
one.
I think
because
these can be
like
really
it.
cool to work with. It's just like an interesting thing, and like you can see kind of how it's gonna look. Once it's like polished, you'll like see all the way through it. It shows some nice like dimension to it and stuff.
I don't know how to hold on to it.
Yeah,
to get
something
it
like this is
sanded
too
down.
thin to use on the lap grinder, so you just do this all on the belt. Yeah. And this one, yeah, I would. Oh, you've already been on the belt with this.
Yeah.
You probably just want to go up a grit level to like an 80, which was this 80?
Yeah.
That was okay.
Yeah. I'm having trouble
Some
with
of the
those
belts don't
ridges.
seem to be very well marked. It's hard to tell if they're 80 or not.
Yeah. Well, the far ones are 80 and 60.
Okay.
This is just a ways to go down here. I'll put out a new 60, and that'll go through this really quickly. Because last time I noticed that the 60 even is a bit worn down. But all marks, as you probably noticed, still from the saw, so it's just going to take some time.
Okay.
But it looks like you're on the right track here. I would, before you go any further, encourage you to get the rest of these chips out of here. Yeah, cool. Any other general questions about?
Can we do mine?
Yeah. This one. Yeah, so I'd smooth this out on the belt. You want it to stay rounded or flat? Flat. So.
I was just having an issue because it is broken here and it's a lot more flaccid here anyway.
Yeah, so if you see on this, it has a little bit of a chunk chipped out of here. So probably best to start on the belt so that you don't end up with a chunk that just lets loose as you're rough grinding it. So I take the mass down on the belt sander and then flatten it.
What about the other side?
Other side, it's pretty rounded right now. You have this pretty big rounded edge, so you can either,
And it stands flat.
yeah, wiggly flat, right? So wiggly flat means that it's not going to be,
Stable.
well, it's stable enough, but the real concern is that you won't really be able to get this through the stages on the lap grinder because it's not flat, right? And you also, even if something, this is a good example of this, even if it's like close to flat, you don't want to be like wiggling something back and forth. That's a good way to just like gouge into the pad. So you want to avoid like trying to rock something back and forth on there. So probably best to either go back to the roughest grit and totally flatten it out, or just continue on the belt and continue to flatten it on the belt. Yeah.
But as far as chips,
Chips, you have a little bit around the edge to clean up. Pretty minimal, but best to get them out before you go any further, because just in case you slip or something like that, then you know what you need to cover before you move on. You're welcome. And I'd encourage you guys too to like play around with stuff like slices and like little ends that you cut off, because these can end up being like really cool elements for your piece. Whether you glue some of these together, which we'll talk about next week. So we'll do this today. On Wednesday, we'll do some more stuff in the hot shop with color, with using stringer to be able to draw on, and texture and stuff like that. I did bring out this piece. I made this in the other class, not this one, right? Yeah.